I'm doing a little presentation because I just realized probably about a month ago we were talking on Wednesday night and about some of the experiences of what we had in Israel about that group, and I realized just with the small group on Wednesday that we'd never really talked about some Jewish cultural things of Israel and whatnot. So I'm going to kind of apply that today to the sermon to share some stuff with you guys, which enlightens things within the Bible that you don't necessarily think about because we're not Jewish, but Jesus was, and why are certain things so important. Like, why was it so weird that he was healing someone on the Sabbath? Why is it so weird that they were even eating without washing their hands? Things like that. Until you go to Israel and get immersed in the culture still of the Jewish people, you can't really grasp that. So I think this is important too for what our theme's been this year. And this quarter, we're finishing up the year with God and others. And I think it's important that we learn about other groups and cultures out there so that we can relate to them and communicate with them and be that light and explain the word to them. And without spreading and sharing our experiences, we kind of get stuck on that. So we'll start off here. This here is just a outside deep view of a recreated village. Just looking out across the countryside, that's the whole town. We're in the middle of the village that they recreated here. So to start off with, we're going to go through if this was a Sunday Shabbat for us, and we're Jewish right now, the first place we went to is right here, the synagogue. So this is an old synagogue that's completely deteriorated. If you look out around, I'm going to come out here. Hopefully they can still see me so I can point at stuff. So you'll see in the other picture, but like this here is what they would store the scrolls in. Your seats would be out around the outside edge. There's no seats in the middle. You only sit in the outside. And then this here would be like your podium that the teacher would be talking from. So that's there. This would be what it would have been from what they could tell with what debris was still there at this particular one in Capernaum, what it would have looked like before it all collapsed over age and everything there. But definitely completely different. And then this here is the one that they recreated. So this is our guy, our tour guide talking to us from the podium here. You can see as they talk about, sometimes you see in Scripture, they say the important seats of the synagogue that the Pharisees always fought over. So your important seats are these ones back here right behind the speaker. But until you sit in the synagogue and see that like all the seats, like because you have the little door back here, and then literally right on both sides, you start with just like 3 rows of bleacher seats out around. That's how every Jewish synagogue was built. Like you go all over Israel and they're all basically the same setup, and you'll see the foundation still there. Some of them still have the steps, what you would sit on. Some of them, the podium's intact and whatnot. So just kind of cool to think that, all right, so we're starting off, it's the Shabbat, we're in synagogue here. But what did we forget to do before we came to synagogue? Anybody know? None of you went to the mikveh this morning and cleansed yourself before you came to Shabbat? So this is one that the water still actually holds in. The other one, obviously, the water doesn't. But these are all over Israel, every town, it was kind of a status symbol, too. Like, once you got so rich, you could put your own mikveh in for your house or your area so that you didn't have to travel as far, the convenience of it, so that you didn't have to go so far. It was on your way to go to synagogue. But you had to immerse yourself completely before you went to synagogue on Sundays. They're everywhere, I'm telling you. Like, Leo attributed, like, you go around Israel, you cannot go far without running into another mikveh. But they all had running water going through them so that it kept fresh water in it. So it's not like they're stagnant, nasty little pools of water. Like which, thinking about this, think 2,000 years ago, and reliable plumbing enough that all of these, as popular as they are all over Israel, all these houses and areas, that they kept a spring of water flowing through all of them. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of springs in Israel, which helps, but you still have to have the water flowing through all of these. Building it all with stone, it's just, if you're an engineering mind like mine, it's fascinating to think of. So what else would we do on Shabbat? So this here is the Western Wall. Very important for all the Jewish people that are in Israel to go to the wall during Shabbat. So you notice the wall that's right down the middle. You are not allowed, the men and women, to go down to the same side to say your prayers at the Western Wall. So this side, if I remember correctly, this front one here is the women's side, and then the men are all over on this side. They had just had an event that day of some sort, so that's why all the chairs were set up. There was like a long session there, something else going on. But it's one of those things you really can't grasp the feeling of it until you're there, but like just a constant flow of people every time that we walk through the old city and go past this, because there's a big courtyard in front of it that hooks a lot of the rest of the city together in Jerusalem. And we cross through there many times, and every hour of the day there are still hundreds of people there praying. And you can see the difference even within the Jewish culture, just like with Christians. There's different groups and sects and denominations within it, and there's different ways that they're praying, different color robes that they're wearing, like there's different color blacks and grays, and it just, you don't think about details like that if you think, oh, the Jewish people are they're Jewish. Well, it's kind of the same as Christian. There's X number of different denominations of Christians, so the Jewish are much the same way. But definitely interesting here at the Western Wall. Another important part of being at the Western Wall is, especially on Shabbat, being very respectful of what they're doing. I mean, they're there at the wall praying. It is an open space, but it's still, they're praying to be respectful, no pictures, all of that. We found out afterwards, but we thought that all the women had to put on like a head covering to go up to the wall, but that was misunderstood. But like all the guys, they do ask that you put on a yarmulke and they have a stand there sitting with a bunch of yarmulkes on to go up to the Western Wall to pray, to respect the traditions of the Jewish people, and it's their state and their area. So you do that. It just, you can't grasp that like just being respectful of another group of people until you're there and asked to do all those things. Like, is it weird for me to put on a yarmulke? Absolutely. I'm like, did I ever think I'd put on a yarmulke? But out of respect for what they believe and do, like, so that you can still see the same place that, I mean, this is the Western Wall of the temple that is very historic and relevant to everything that we believe as Christians, not to what the Jewish people do, but it's still an important place for us. So you respect what they're doing. It's their area. They're still preserving it, keeping it up, and working and everything. So pretty cool there. So this is a picture from our hotel on the Sea of Galilee. So I just want to talk some about the Shabbat while this picture's up here. We talked about it on Wednesday nights, and I experienced it, and I didn't realize I hadn't shared it. So Leah and I, we got back. So Shabbat, does anyone know when it starts? Every week. Sundown Saturday night is when Shabbat starts, and that is their Sabbath that starts and goes for 24 hours until Sunday night at sundown. So we got back early that Saturday from wherever we were touring that day, and Leah and I were like, let's go walk. There's an open market near where our hotel's at. Not here at the Sea of Galilee, but in Jerusalem. And literally I think they know the time, it changes every day just like the sun, but they deem what time sundown is, and at 5:15 a bell rings throughout Jerusalem. Now we're going through this market and we see people, some of them are rushing around trying to clean up their shop. Some of them have just given up because they know they're not going to get it done. But literally when the bell rings, there's people that have all their produce still in their stand, and they literally stop and they walk away from it to go back home. You do no work on the Sabbath. On Shabbat, you do nothing. To the point that we explained it, when you go in the hotel, our tour guide tells us, don't get in the Shabbat elevator unless you want to ride every floor the whole way up. Pushing the button is too much work, so on Shabbat, there is an elevator in each hotel that stops on every floor. No, it's not a kid that went in and pushed all the buttons. It's you stopping on every floor because it's too much work to push the button. But until you experience, when they say we're not doing anything on Shabbat, we're not doing anything. So, when we go to the hotel that night, obviously dinner's not till 6:30, 7. Well, it's already dark. You can tell the food that we're being served that night was all made. They'll still put it out for you, but some of it's starting to get cold. You can tell that it's not exactly the freshest meal you've eaten that night, because at Shabbat time starting, there's no work being done. I don't think I shared it in front of the group, but even if I did, I'll share it. Some of you can listen again. So that night, later on, we were actually walking down to the old city from our hotel. And it was me. We had a van, but there wasn't enough seats. So myself, Leah's twin brother Levi and John Ginden, a guy that went with us on the trip, we decide we'll walk. It's a mile or so, but we're fine. We just go experience Jerusalem. We'll walk down. We start walking. We maybe get 2 blocks from the hotel, and this girl comes running out on the street. Hey, 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 hey. We're like, all right, what's up? Like, her brother starts talking to her. She's like, are you guys American? We're like, yeah. She's like, can you help me? Help me. She's like, well, what do you need? I need help. I'll show you. I need help. Well, her brother, super helpful guy. I'm sorry, I love him, but he does not travel the world. He's not really aware of some situations you shouldn't put yourself in. But at the same time, he's a very helpful guy, and I appreciate that for him. But here we go. Levi starts following this girl down the street. So me and John are like, I guess we're going with Levi to keep him safe and see what he gets into. So we start going, and this girl takes us down this street. We turn another street. At this point, I don't know where we're at exactly off the main drag that we were on beforehand. We come up to the house, and there's her mom standing there and her daughter. There's 3 women now standing in the doorway of this house, and my red flags are going off. What are we getting ourselves into here, guys? So she walks, she's like, I need power. Because she had some English, but it wasn't real clear of what she wanted. So she said, and she pointed to the breaker box, and Levi goes in, slams the breaker back up. Sparks fly, shoot out across, and it's Levi, clueless, just electric flying all over the place. We're good. Well, what had happened, so actually she had the crock pot plugged in. Well, when the heat started to ask for it on the crock pot, it tripped the breaker. But it's Shabbat. She can't move the crock pot. She can't reset the breaker. The men of the house are all at the western wall praying because it's Shabbat. When they come back from praying, the food's supposed to be ready in the crock pots for them to eat for the next 24 hours because they can't cook anything. So John, the other guy with me, while I'm playing kind of security door guy that we don't get trapped in this house with these 3 women, John goes in and tries to explain, well, which place did you plug in? He moves the crock pot for him, plugs it into a different circuit breaker. We flip the breaker back on for him, and they're going, oh, thank you. But how often do we move a crock pot or we trip a breaker and we walk down and we flip it back on? We don't think about, in reverence of God, not doing absolutely anything on Sunday. To us, keeping the Sabbath holy is we're here, we're at church on Sunday. Oh, maybe I didn't go actually work. Maybe I, hung out with my family instead of going and doing some project I wanted to do. We don't think about not moving a crock pot, not pushing an elevator button. And it's all in respect for God and the traditions of what they have. And that's what's so cool of you literally see an entire city shut down. Some of the groups of the denominations of the Jewish, they even have rules about how far they can walk on the Sabbath. So you'll see some of them, you'll see 10 men gathered up on a corner, and they're a group. They live too far from the Western Wall to go the whole way down to pray, but this is where they're meeting together to pray because that's not too much work for their group to meet there. But it's just fascinating, until you see an entire city. Imagine just going to Pittsburgh and a bell rings and everything just stops. It's not going to happen, right? They do this every week religiously in Israel. It's just fascinating to think about. But that's where, if you go back to the Bible and you think whenever the Pharisees are freaking out about Jesus healing somebody on the Sabbath, to us, it's he already healed a bunch of people. What's one more on a Sunday? What's that matter? But to the Jewish people, we do nothing. And when I say nothing, it's nothing. So doing anything is the same thing. Just like I said, our food. The next morning on Sunday morning of Shabbat, all your breakfast is going to be day-old pastries and stuff. It's okay, but you can tell it's not. I went to Dunkin' Donuts this morning and this is a fresh donut. It's they left this one here from yesterday. It's edible, but not as good. So when you hear about the story of them going and his disciples picking barley grains out of the field, they weren't allowed to pick food or feed themselves that day. It had to be something already prepared. And until you experience that, it's pretty cool. So I'll stop talking about Shabbat then. So this here, very little biblical reference, but at the same time fascinating. This is Bet Shean, okay? Anybody know the one point that Bet Shean has in the Bible? It is the city where Solomon and his sons were hung off the wall whenever they were killed. So not a lot of biblical reference, but what I find cool, really cool about this, none of this was unearthed in the 80s. This whole project started whenever the oil embargo and everything started back in the late 70s with OPEC, and Israel had no work. So it's kind of like, think back to the Depression here. There was everything struggling. The Israel government devoted a bunch of money to pay people to literally come become archaeologists and start unearthing. And they knew this was here. It was all covered, and they're like, we don't have the time or money. But during that time, they started to uncover all of it. And now, it's 40 years later now, all of this is unearthed. It's fascinating. I don't think we put the picture of me sitting on the...
I don't know, but they said when we were there, that's only 10%
Yeah, 10% of the whole thing, and that's 40 years of uncovering. But there was a picture, I think I forgot to add it, but it was like, they actually uncovered an old, I guess I can sort of demonstrate, but they uncovered an old restroom of the time. And literally, like, there is stone pieces sat far enough apart that you're supposed to sit on two stone pieces and then do your business between them. And then there's, just like the mikvahs, there's water, fresh spring running down through behind for the cleanliness of it. And like, it's all there preserved, like as they unearthed everything, like sticking out of this wall, you have row after row of two stones sitting next to each other. So me and her brother took a picture of us sitting on them, but we didn't make the cut. But like literally flowing water going through that to flush everything right out for the sanitariness of the time. Like, you don't capture things like that till you walk through a city like this, but that's Bet Shean. Lots still to be uncovered. I mean, and that's the thing too, everywhere you go in Israel, they're still uncovering stuff. Like every one of these places, there was a section, it's off over here to the right, where they were working that day still 5-gallon buckets and little mini excavator to do some of the top, and then basically after that, it's 5-gallon buckets. You see a bucket brigade of just buckets being hauled off of all these places, like as they still uncover stuff. Just absolutely fascinating. So this is the one side. The next picture will be farther over this way, and this is all the same place. So like that was the old plaza, this is the other, and they're working out here to the right now. So the other thing, for time's sake today, but like some other time I'll share it, this whole walkway, the main road down through there, is all mosaic tile, and it's all still like beautiful colors of design years later just laid out there. Super fascinating. And that was the main walkway through town, and it was all mosaic tiles. So like, even though Bet Shean wasn't like a super relevant biblical city, it was where Solomon was at, which was very important. He's very wisest king, that they had. So a very prosperous, wealthy town we're talking about here in Jesus' time. So there was a lot of just fascinating stuff about Bet Shean and just how well it's preserved there. So this here is a boat that they actually found and preserved from Jesus' time. That's one of those odd stories of everywhere goes through droughts and floods. It was back, I want to say, if I remember correctly, like 40s or 60s, somewhere in there. Israel had a horrible drought. And they actually, in the Sea of Galilee, saw the front little point of this sticking up out of the mud and like went and investigated it. There's a whole video. They actually took a lot of time to preserve to get this right. They actually encased the whole thing in spray foam as they excavated it to keep it together. And then as they got it out of the mud of the Sea of Galilee, brought it in, and then started like putting epoxy into what was left of it to keep it together. But like this here, so when you think about Jesus going across the Sea of Galilee with his disciples, this is basically the fishing boat that they would use at the time. That's the design. They found other remnants and pieces of one, but this is the only fully intact one that they've ever completely excavated. Pretty cool to think of like, it's definitely big enough for 12 people or so to fit in, but like, they weren't exactly cozy going across, and you think all the disciples jumping in to go across the other side. It's not a light boat or a small boat. Like, it was definitely big enough to get battered around, but also a big enough boat that if anyone's paddled even a canoe, start thinking when you start paddling a boat, like there's some work there and winds start working against you. It's a bigger boat. So it was pretty cool that we saw this. So this, Leah, Okay, yeah, it's the Sea of Galilee. I couldn't tell because that looked like a wall in the front. That's the boat whenever we went out on the Sea of Galilee. So we talk about that a lot. And I've talked many times about we talk about all the people following Jesus to the other side. So that just look off on the horizon of the hills and stuff. Like, as I've said many times, it's not flat for them to walk around a part of the side. Like, there is hills and stuff to go over. Like, it's not, ooh, let's take a little mosey walk to the other side while Jesus paddles across. Like this, there is hills. Like, it was not an easy feat, but super calm, crisp day. And I've shared with you guys before, to me, this was one of those days I'm like, why are we spending half the day going out on the Sea of Galilee? Like, I can go ride a boat back in the States. Like, this is pointless. But that was the day I got the most emotional and the most affected on the whole trip, because when you get out there and it's just crystal glass clear, like, you could just feel the presence, like, that this is a very important biblical spot. And and that whole morning, like, I was in a grumpy mood. I'm like, why are we literally spending half the day doing this? But, like, it was one of those moments where God's like, no, you need to experience the calmness that this is of, like, what the Sea of Galilee is. And ever since then, I've looked at the Sea of Galilee and all the stories surrounding it in a completely different way. But that's the old Sea of Galilee there. I think it's 12 miles by 6 miles, something. It's not huge, but, yeah, it's not huge, but not small. I mean, you can see to the other side, but, yeah. So this is Caesarea Philippi. This hole up here that you see, we'll have another picture in a little bit, that's the headwaters of the Jordan. Like, so the headwaters are farther up, but it's kind of one of those weird things where the river goes underground and then all of a sudden it pops back up through the rock. So, like, literally the river comes back out of the ground there and kind of starts, which is not something we see. I think there's one out in Texas that I know of where I was near before, but it's not something you hear about all the time, where it's like all of a sudden you're walking along, it's like, oh, this big river just starts out of the ground. Like, you don't check that out that often, but this here is the start of the Jordan River and where it runs from, so pretty cool there. So this is the pool of the Jordan. So this is actually all around this. It's kind of a weird area because it's the headwaters of Jordan. We think of the Jordan, John the Baptist baptizing. But this is also the pool where all the Baals did all their worship of throwing virgin girls in and said, hey, if they come back up, that's a good one, or the gods are pleased with us. If they drowned, I guess the gods liked our sacrifice, they took it. Like, so there's all kind of pagan stuff on this whole wall up here above. You can see, like, that's a cutout, and then, like, you can see the structure up around it that had fell off of the rock wall, and there's carvings on the rock wall. Like, this is a very pagan worship site historically, but also the headwaters of the Jordan, so it's kind of one of those of colliding of two worlds. But just an interesting thing, like, because it's in the Bible talking about doing worship to Baal, and we throw all of our animals and stuff in there, and this is the spot where it happened. And that's the thing, too, that's weird when you go to Israel. Can they pinpoint and say exactly from 2,000 years ago, this is where this happened? Not always. But, like, when we talk about a pit at the Jordan and headwaters, this one you can pretty much say, like, this hasn't moved, like, this isn't a different place. So, like, this is one of the ones that like, this is what Scripture is telling us when you go and see it. Some of the other ones, it's like, it may have been over there, over here, but, like, we're in the area, we're in the vicinity. But, like, this one, that was one of the things I found pretty cool about it, too. This here is the Dead Sea. So, a lot to talk about here, just for reverence of different things. The water was way up here. Like, all this has been eroded down, and it all was full. So, like, we're not talking a little drop, because, like, from just where the road here is, where we're at, down to here, we're talking probably 100 feet or more of elevation drop. And then from where we're at road, you're talking another 100, 200 feet up to the top sides of the cliffs. But, like, the Dead Sea, if anybody knows geography and stuff, it hasn't been rising in years. Like, we're talking thousands of years. It's been constantly dropping because of evaporation. Like, there's a stream coming into it. But as cultures started to take off, they cut water off. They started diverting water, just like the whole western part of the United States, where they're running out of water. agriculture, people using it, they kept pulling water off. They're like, well, it just runs into the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't matter. It doesn't, but at the same time, if you're not adding anything to something or adding less to something that's already being evaporated really fast, it's going to keep dropping. So Dead Sea is incredibly low compared to where it's been. They're actually, when we were over there, which I haven't heard any update on, they were actually talking about running a pipeline through somehow from the Mediterranean to start filling up the water level that should be going in. Like, there's a lot of concerns because ecology-wise, with that whole area, if they don't keep the Dead Sea full, all the agriculture that runs off of the water upstream of it goes kaput and it's gone. So interesting stuff there. So the reason why I say the elevation is so important, I believe it's the next picture. No, this here's a fun one of me. Any of you that have ever talked to me, I cannot swim. I sink like a rock. I can take a full breath and sit on the bottom of the pool. This was an out-of-body experience for me whenever I could float for the first time in the Dead Sea. That is, I am not touching the bottom. My feet and hands are both in the air. It was awesome because I've never felt that in my life. It was really cool. So let you all enjoy that with me. But I will say it is the slimiest, nastiest experience you will ever have when you get out of the Dead Sea. I grew up on a farm. I still farm. I've been covered in manure and all kinds of other stuff that I don't want to talk about. Getting out of there is disgusting. Like, your body is coated in so much salt it doesn't know what to do, and you just feel like you are covered in a fish, like a slimy fish. But at the same time, you're able to float from it. I still have those shoes, and I think they still smell like salt. So, fun facts. And then I was also at the time still staying with her brother who did not wring out any of his stuff when we went back to the hotel, and then I had to smell that for the rest of the trip as it hung in our room. Great times. So anyways, where the elevation was important is this here is Qumran, Dead Sea Scrolls. Everybody knows that. Well, Dead Sea Scrolls are also the people that stayed right outside of the, right around the Dead Sea areas where they were at. Qumran's right beside it. These cliffs where they found, like, so this is one hole here, this one they obviously cleaned the door out. There's little ones here, you see some smaller ones back in the distance. Kind of looks like a Star Wars type setting of you see all the little holes in the wall. They're tiny, and a lot of them, until you get there, they still don't know if they've really found all of them because there's such tiny entrances to some of these because as dirt and stuff has fell down over, the entrance gets closed. But also, elevation-wise, how do you get to something that's here and there's a cliff after it, like, and you're looking for a little hole? Like, it's not something that's easy to find. So really, if you think about when they put the Dead Sea Scrolls away, the water level was up there. The people had their boats, they went around, they had all these caves, like they'd hang out in them. That's fine, but the water levels only went down. This is now several hundred feet up from where the Dead Sea's at. So you're talking a cliff. So like, when people wonder why did the Dead Sea Scrolls stay hidden so long, it's like, well, when you go there and see where they found them at, it's like, okay, this kind of makes sense. Like, I'm not going to just go scale a cliff, especially, I don't remember all the rock structures, but like this isn't exactly a sandstone or something you really want to be grabbing a hold of. Like, it's crumbly rock. You're not going to go mountain climbing on this and say, I'm going to make it. You're going to slide back down the hill. Like, so you have no reason for anybody to be going up these hills to experience or go into any of these areas. So this is actually from Masada, which I have a whole bunch I could talk to about that. But once again, this, as they dug out one of these town or huts or houses, whatever you want to call it, in the town, this is original mosaic still on the walls from when they excavated. And there's little spots. This picture doesn't show it. Some of them, they have the what's been there, and that's how this one's all been there. Then they'll have a black line, and then they tried to recreate after. And even what they've restored and recreated, it's already fading worse than what was done 2,000 years ago. Like, but it's just kind of cool to think that like these bright colors, I mean, you're talking reds, you can see a green right in here. Like, we're 2,000 years plus, and like this is still just right there. And this was all buried under dirt that they excavated. And when you got all the dirt out of there, you still see these beautiful mosaics and stuff sitting there painted on the walls. So I've shared some of this before. So the garden tomb, I just think it's pretty fascinating to look. This is where it's one of those things, again, do they know if this is the exact tomb? No, but they know it was in this area. Like, and it's not a big area. Like, it's, I would say, honestly, about the size of our church building. Like, they know from all the accounts, it's somewhere in this area. Like, and just to be in the spot where you think of, like, all Jesus' disciples coming out and being like, stones rolled back, like, he's not here. Like, we're not searching through an entire cemetery like we think about nowadays, like, oh, go over and how big pretty much all cemeteries are here in the States. Like, we're not looking through a whole cemetery. We're looking through this little area. And, like, it's right there. You can't get lost. You can't miss it. Like, it's just pretty cool. So, it's the garden tomb. So, last slide here. I could not find it for the life of me because, as I've shared before, I know Sue laughed about it. On the day that we went down the Jesus walk of what he would have done when he was being crucified and walked down the Mount of Olives, we had got out of the bus. The weather looked decent, so we all get out of the bus. We're taking our group photo. We knew we were taking a group photo, so we didn't want to be all bundled up, so we take our whole group photo, and we look out over the dome of the rock, and there's this cloud, and we look at it, and we're like, it's not going to be bad. We'll be all right. We take the picture of the bus. It's like, all right, anybody need anything? We're like, no, go ahead. We're good. Bus starts pulling away. We all turn back around and look out over the dome, and we're like, that cloud does not look good. About 5 minutes later, it was not good. It was raining sideways. The temperature had dropped. There was actually hail in Israel, which doesn't really happen that often. We were soaked. There was water running down the street underneath of us as we're walking down a grade of bricks that you don't want to walk down when they're dry. It was absolutely miserable. So we didn't exactly take a picture of the olive tree in the Garden of Gethsemane while we were there. This, however, is a olive tree in the city of David. The reason why this fascinates me just to think about, because we don't see olive trees here. It's not something we get to experience here where we live. But olive trees grow incredibly slow, incredibly slow. The wood is absolutely beautiful whenever they do carvings and stuff out of it because of how tight the grain is. Like, it's beautiful. This tree, I know, because of how big the one was in the Garden of Gethsemane, it was around at Jesus' time. And, like, they know at the speed that these grow, like, there is no doubt that, like, certain ones, there's not a lot of them left in Israel because, like any other tree, like, they get diseased, they get a cut, they build around it, roots get destroyed. But there is still some of them, and this is one in the city of David, that, like, that tree was there when Jesus and his disciples walked through. Now, did he walk through beside this tree or not? You don't know, but, like, it's still just cool to think of, like, a tree. We think of, like, it's a short life cycle, like, not a big deal. We think of the California redwoods. I think they're like 600 years or something. No, we're talking 2,000-year-old trees still alive. So beautiful wood, beautiful area of everything. Like I said, you guys want to ask questions some other time, you can, or, I have more to share, but we kind of switched things up this week. I was doing sermon, not Bible study, so I cut some pictures out, but we'll share them all again some other time. If you guys have any questions about anything, feel free to ask, but I hope this helps you understand a little bit more of Israel in general and what Jewish culture is like and why it means so many different things within the Bible. So hopefully that helps you all out. I think Eric's ready to sing our next song and keep going. Thank you.